Hi, Kirsty.
Hi.
We've dealt quite a lot of the subject of good keeping, but today what I'd like to do is to explain the mechanics of how it works. And the first principle one has to understand is something called entrainment. And what this means is, for instance, if you have a tuning fork and you bang it next to another tuning fork that has the same resonance, so they're both on the note C, the first tuning fork, which is resonating, is going to cause the second fork to also resonate. So that there's an exchange of vibration between the two. And it's because they're both on the same note. In other words, they're co-resonant. They call that the resonant coherency. And as a grid keeper, what one does, one is able to resonate oneself by your thoughts, emotions, by your standards and values, by the way you speak and the way you act and attitudes towards life and others, that sends out a kind of resonance, and that is your soul resonant. And every soul has a different, unique resonance. And in the universe, that is how we are recognized, not by our names or our faces, but by our soul resonance. So having that resonance, we've talked a bit about this before, that there's a kind of dial-in procedure where you as an authentic soul are connecting to the universe so that you can receive and transmit energy, waves of energy. And in our next meeting, which will be our last on this subject, we'll talk about what kind of information you can exchange into the system. So there's some information you can exchange and there's some information you can't exchange, and how one manages and controls that. But once people realize what entrainment is, then it's very important that because the whole multi-dimensional system works on that. It's co-resonance between vibrating energies, light and sound. So once we understand entrainment, if you look at the tuning fork example, it's the tuning fork vibrating that gives it its unique identity and unique resonant tone. And it will cause other matter beings in one's vicinity to also start resonating. So that's how we are affecting all the time our environment, not only the people in our environment, but also the plants, the minerals, the animals, the birds, the fish, and animals are much better at recognizing resonance than we are. I've noticed this, for instance, with my dogs. They will know, they can sense when you're in a depressed mood, or when you are happy, they get happy. When you are expressing joy, they will also express joy. And so they have this unique ability to pick up resonance because they don't understand feelings. They've never been brainwashed to say, well, this is what happy feels like and this is what sadness feels like. It's just a natural picking up of the resonance. And so as a grid keeper, it's a big responsibility to know yourself, to be your authentic self, to act in integrity, and to know how the system works. But once you do that, it's amazing how you can change your hologram, because that's what life really is. We are creating a hologram, a kind of a Truman Show. Except what happens here is people are creating a Truman Show, not of their own making, but one that is being indoctrinated into them, so that acting out somebody else's thoughts that have been indoctrinated into them. They're acting out the preconditioned emotions that they've been taught. So we are creating, we have this amazing ability to create this hologram, but we're creating someone else's hologram. So a grid keeper has to be cognitively aware of that and understand and take on the responsibility to create and influence the hologram that we're in a positive way, in a constructive way, in a way that brings people hope, it brings people faith, builds trust between not only people and people, but people and animals, people in the environment. And so it's a very big responsibility, but it's an exciting thing, because in 2006, my higher self talked about how I as a grid keeper could affect change on the planet. And at that stage, I thought, no, the things that I'd like to experience on this planet are just not possible, not in my lifetime. But having said that, since then, I can look back and see how the world has changed enormously since 2006. And I think that a lot of the people who are waking up, and another thing that people should understand, that everybody, in a sense, is a grid keeper. Everybody's vibrating, sending and receiving messages from the universe, but the grid keeper has to do it consciously. And when you're consciously affecting the waves around you, the sound and light waves around you, you automatically are entraining that other thing to resonate at the resonance that you're resonating at. So each time you think a thought, there is a certain resonance to that. Every time you have an emotion, there's a certain resonance to that. And they work together. Our thoughts, which are electric energy, which are electric energy waves, are carried on our magnetic energy waves. And our magnetic energy waves are our emotions. So when your thoughts and emotions are coherent, the thought wave, which will determine the frequency of that wave, when they in coherency, will connect with the universal waves. And it goes out and it loops around and it comes back in again. It goes out and loops around and comes back in, because that's how the universe, everything is spiraling. And when we reinforce that, so we have to be consistent in our desires. We have to be consistent in our intentions. We have to be consistent with our desires. We have to be consistent with our the pictures that we create in our minds, our imagination, in other words. So when we create this consistency in our thoughts and create this coherency between the thoughts and the emotions, we can affect the hologram or the life experience we're having by doing that. And besides being the keepers of the guardians of the ley lines and grid lines on this planet, we also have this role of affecting the experience of everyone in our holographic field. And is this a very real thing? Well, I do find it a very real thing, because sometimes when I'm with people and the mood is somber and solemn and so on, I can just change that atmosphere by changing my attitude. By looking at someone and say, come on, guys, it's not so bad. Let's smile. Let's tell a joke. And somebody tell a joke and we get things laughing. And people will immediately respond and change. And it's the same with when you're a conscious grip keeper. You don't actually have to be with people to affect that change. You just have to trust the way the universe works do the pictures in your mind, imagine the changes you'd like to experience, and then just put that out there. Okay. I just need a bit of water.
Mm.
Now, so that's basically the mechanics of how it works. But, you know, it's a very complex system because there are waves within waves and there's certain designs. But if one understands the toroidal field, you will understand how a toroid is an energy field. It has a 0 point in the center where it's like a tornado and it's spinning around. And you've got positive and negative flow, energy flows, lines passing through it. So it gets quite complex, but we kind of experience our energy lives in the toroidal field. So it goes out and it loops back and comes back. And every time it goes out, it's crossing over an opposite energy field. So the electrics come in, say, in this direction, and the emotions come down in this direction. And there's timing, there's frequency to how that works. And each time they cross over, they create a spark. And that spark is a life force that goes out to support the toroidal field. It's almost, if you want to think of perpetual energy, you know, people on this planet say, well, is it possible to create a perpetual energy field? And I think, well, I don't understand. We are the perpetual energy field. Yeah, so that's sort of how the mechanics works. And when I was being asked to do a grid keep, and I said, well, what are the requirements? What do I have to do? And they explained to me that I have to be authentic, acting in integrity, to accept responsibility, to always be in co-resonance with the logos, which is the word, and the word is the sound of God. In the Bible, it says, in the beginning was the word. That word is logos, and that is the sounds that emanate from God, from the universe. We are God. Everything is God. We're in a God soup. And so we are in effect expressions of energy, and we are meant, we were designed to be guardians of the energy fields of this planet, and to guard the experiences and to create better experiences for ourselves and for other people on the planet. We lost that ability 26,000 years ago, but we can reclaim it. It's still there. The universe hasn't changed. It's us who've changed. But we can go back to that universal design and be conformed to the image of Christ. That's what Paul meant when he said those words. We conform to the way God is. So it's a very big responsibility. But having said that, it's not an onerous responsibility, because if you do it with joy and love and kindness and peace, it becomes quite an easy exercise. So I had to learn to, I said, well, you know, what do you mean be authentic? How does one become authentic? And my higher self said, well, you have to know who you really are. And I said, well, I sort of know who I am, but explain that a bit more. And he said, well, when you incarnate here on this planet, you are incarnated with a certain consciousness. And in that consciousness is an expression of all the prior lifetimes you've had being expressed in this particular lifetime. And so he said to me, what I suggest you do is that you do an age regression of yourself to discover who you were when you first incarnated, because that is really who you are. So I did that exercise and started at the age of 7, because when I first thought about it, I could hardly remember anything of my life before the age of 7. So I had to really work hard to go back and remember. So I started at the age of 7 and said I tried to remember my school teacher, who was Mrs. Hawley. My physical training teacher was Mr. van Staten. My headmaster was Mr. Malone. Our woodworking teacher was Mr. Smith. And all these details I'd forgotten. And then I remembered my fellow pupils in my class and where we sat in the class and who did what and what the characteristics were of each person, what we did at break time, the games we played, how we played them, some of the funny moments of in those games. And so I spent a lot of time with age 7. Then I went back into age 6. And from there, I regressed right down to the age of 1. And at the age of 1, I could remember my nanny, a black lady by the name of Letia. She was a Sotho woman. She had a son who was born just before I was born, and his name was Boy. And he and I played together, and she used to carry me on her back with a blanket, as Sotho women do carry their children. And I would be on her back while she did the housework. I can remember the Hoover sounds. I can remember the smell of her blanket, which smelled of smoke, because she had to cook with a wood fire. So in her little shack at nurses' quarters. And so I could remember the smell of this wood smoke. I could remember the smell of her body. She wore a kind of, it's not a perfume, but a rose water. And I could remember the smell of the rose water that she used to put on her body. And I could remember the feeling of her body moving backwards and forward, and that would put me to sleep. I remembered all kinds of details. Then one day I was just sitting, and I was in this process of trying to remember what I was like when I was younger, and then I remembered my birth. And I remembered being in my mother's womb, feeling very warm and comfortable in her womb, and hearing her heart beating. And it was, I loved the sound of that rhythm that I could feel and sense around me. And then all hell broke loose, and the waters broke. And suddenly I was being splashed down a vaginal canal, out into the world. And when my head popped out, I was blinded by this very bright light in the operating theater, which caused crazy pain through my head. I remember the doctor then holding me upside down so that all the vaginal fluids could be emptied from my stomach, and him turning me over and then handing me to a nurse. And there was a doctor, his name was Dr. Jacobs, and I remember there were 2 nurses. They were both white ladies, and then they cleaned me. They cut my umbilical cord, tied it up, wrapped me in a blanket. And so I remembered being born. And then I did a comparison of what it was like. What was I like when I was that little baby, and who am I now? Who I was at that time. And I realized there was this great difference between the 2 people. And so my higher self suggested, he said, start working with your inner child, that little boy that you were, and try to remember him and try to express that little boy that you were. And he said, because when you are born innocent. Contrary to the religious dogma, we were told we are born into sin, and all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, and there's no salvation for you unless you accept Jesus as your Lord. And all this kind of nonsense that it imputes us as guilty from birth, which is nonsense. We are actually innocent when we are born here, and and we experience different, and then we learn to sin. We learn how to lie, we learn how to steal, we learn how to be prejudiced, we learn to be racialist, we learn to be nasty to other people. These are all learned behaviors. We're not that person when we are born. And so I identified myself as that innocent little boy. It made a big difference in my life, because I suddenly realized that I didn't have to be on my knees every night asking for forgiveness, that I could go out for forgiving other people, in as much as you forgive other people, you are forgiven. And so it's forgiveness is an energy. And so as you pass on this forgiveness, you pass on this energy to other people, it comes back to you. So it's terribly important that people remember this. And the big thing is, for me, it was to accept for myself that I'm an eternal energy being. Sorry, my dogs are barking. To accept that I'm this eternal field of energy that we call a soul, and that there is no beginning or end to my life, that we are in this perpetual, eternal energy field called the universe. And it has many different expressions. But once you can accept that you are that person, and you learn to control your thoughts and emotions, to embrace standards and values, so it takes an examination of your standards and values to do that, and then to have attitudes that that are hopeful, kind, graceful, peaceful, loving, thoughtful, and not possessing an attitude of victim and victimization, but to really just be able to have an attitude towards everything in around you as a wonderful expression of God, so that you're no longer judgmental, but you can just accept people as they are. I hope that's made some sense to you, but that's the mechanics of it. And next week we'll do, or in the next meeting, we'll do a show on what messages you can put into the universe, and how you can affect the hologram. And if we had enough people on this planet doing this, it would change everything, and it is changing everything. I mean, even this last week, we've seen some massive changes. So yeah.
And so what I'm assuming is that potentially, if you are situated near a major ley line, that might be more powerful, but you can be anywhere, because we're one with everything. So yeah.
Yeah, we live in a wonderful universe, and it works in a particular way. And once you know how it works, life becomes more than just an expression in this dimension. It becomes a multi-dimensional experience where you can, because we have a soul template, that soul template carries the design information or design programming for our physicality. So wherever your soul energy goes, it takes your body with it. People think when you ascend, your body's going somewhere. It's not. When you ascend, your soul is going somewhere. The vibration of your soul is vibrating at a higher frequency, and your body will automatically go with that, you see, because your body and soul are very much interlinked and intertwined with each other. Well, thank you for attending, and we'll do another show next week.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.